Welcome back to the center of it all. We are joined now in studio with Dr. Jeanine Staples, Associate Professor of Literacy and Language and African American Studies and Women's and Gender and Sexuality Studies. So, Dr. Staples, thank you so much for taking the time and coming to talk to me today.
Thank you, Alicia, for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
So you have a new book out. It's called Revelations of Asher, Towards Supreme Love and Self. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind it.
So I was inspired to write the book based on a group of women that I worked with for the course of 2 years who were basically interested in the ways that women who were impoverished, women who were disenfranchised, women who were not allowed access to formal education, how those same women were actually also simultaneously repressed by having the retention of social rights, sexual rights, physical rights, and emotional rights in intimate partner relationships. And so the inspiration came from a group of African American women who wanted to do a deep inquiry into lover identity. It's a concept that I coined later after the fact. And they pulled me in this direction, and I went willingly also after realizing the impact of the project.
So why specifically did you look at it after 9/11? What kind of impact did that have?
So after 9/11, what ended up happening from my view is that a lot of media landscape erupted in stories where Black women and brown women were featured prominently. And the stories that we were seeing were based in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, where a lot of popular culture sort of created a lens to sort of examine political life and social life of people in those spaces because of 9/11. And so because the media landscape exploded with these new narratives, and I don't know if they were really new, but they were new for me, and they were new for a lot of the women who were in my circle. It was 9/11 as a sociocultural marker that kind of tipped my gaze.
Okay, and so going kind of back to the inspiration behind the book, it's not told just through one perspective, which I think is really cool. It's told through the 7 fragmented identities. So why did you write it that way?
I thought it was important to write from the perspective of the fragmented selves instead of the perspective of each individual woman, because the fragmented selves really contain the most distilled and essential emotive energy for a particular woman. And because they encompass a range of emotional energies, their voices in telling story were the most impacting. So the voice of rage and anger in the book, her name is Sash. I personify all of them so that women can sort of like form a relationship with them and understand them as identities. Sash is the person, the fragmented self in the book, who tells the story of rape. And she can tell it well. She can tell it the best because she is the most volatile. She is the most defensive. There's another fragmented self, Asher, whom the book is named after. She is the scholarly self. She is the voice of inquiry and investigation. She's determined. She's very sassy, a little sarcastic. And so I wanted to make her the primary protagonist, as it were, or narrator in the book, because she's the one who drives inquiry and investigation. She's the one asking the questions. And so telling the stories from the fragmented selves was a strategic move on my part because I wanted the biggest bang and the most impact of the stories.
And so you came up with the 7 fragmented selves yourselves, correct?
Yes, I found them in the data.
So how did you even come across something like that?
So when you have collections of narrative data, you have journal entries, you have email correspondences, you have transcripts where people have been interviewed. And when you learn to do critical discourse analysis and learn to do deep narrative analysis, what you do is you find themes and trends and patterns over the scope of multiple sets. And what I found was the voice of Sash is the voice that I found first. The reason I found her voice is because she was the most profane. She was the one who was most argumentative. She was the most defensive. And so she rose up in journal entries. She rose up in transcripts. She rose up in email correspondences and was the easiest to find. And so after I found her, I thought to myself, there must be other voices that are similar or maybe very different from her. So I went back into data analysis and looked through everything again to find the other 6 voices, and I found them.
How long did it take you to go through all that data to come up with this?
About 10 years. It takes a long time to do that work. I'm not discouraging anyone who's a qualitative researcher or an interpretivist to not do the work. This was my first time doing a level of work this way, and I designed the methodology to be responsive to my desire and my needs. And there's other things happening. I was working and traveling while I was doing the work.
Okay, so along with the 7 fragmented selves, you introduce a supreme lover as an alternative.
Yes.
So where did that idea come from?
Yes. So what I found was the 7 fragmented selves actually cooperate to form lover identities. So you might have the fragmented self of Sash, who was anger and rage, form a relationship with Laish, who was insecurity, worry, doubt, self-loathing, and they form a lover identity that represents itself as bitch, or represents itself as victim. And that's the lover identity that any one person exhibits to the world. And so from that lover identity, a woman relates to other women, relates to other men, relates to parents, siblings, offspring. And so what I found is those reactionary lover identities of victim, bitch, side chick, main chick, and Bonnie were causing a lot of problems. They actually break off intimacy. They counter trust. They create divides and walls between people. And so we needed another lover identity. We needed another understanding of how to be a lover, how to present oneself as an intimate partner, as a romantic partner, as an emotional partner who could be strong, who could be stable, who could be thoughtful, who could be vulnerable, who could be open. And so constructing a supreme lover identity was my call to action. When I found the 5 toxic lover identities, I thought, well, we can't just leave it here. We can't just say, this is it. This is what you're going to get. We have to create an alternative that a woman can aspire to, so that if she's operating as a bitch, or if she's operating as a victim her whole life, she can say, there's something else I can be. I can be a supreme lover.
So that kind of goes into my next question is, why do women need to identify or know their fragmented selves? Because I may not be aware that I'm one way. Why is it so important for us to know where we stand with that?
It's really important to know your lover identity, because your lover identity, by definition, that's a very first, like I think it's on page 10 of the book, it's right in the beginning. The definition is, a lover identity is your entire relational ideology and way of being. It's your entire relational ideology and way of being. That means it's the way that you bear consciousness as lover. It means that it's the way that you understand yourself as a sexual being, as a romantic partner, as a colleague, as a parent, as a sibling, even as a friend. And so it's important to know your lover identity, because it's important to get conscious, to become aware of how your language systems are constructed, how your emotional triggers actually are in place, what your belief systems are about what's possible in love, about what you're capable of as a lover. Not knowing your lover identity actually causes more problems than you could imagine, because when you don't know your lover identity, you are sort of walking around blind.
Well, Dr. Staples, thank you so much for taking the time and coming to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for having me. This has been great.
Of course, if you would like to pick up a copy of Dr. Staples' book, you can go online to Amazon.com.